Let me show you how I format my simple scope of work for house flips and BRRRR projects. And I emphasize simple because you see, the problem that we deal with in this industry is that a lot of the people who design this software, they like to really focus on designing the software. They make it very complex, and truly it works perfectly. But the problem is that you have to take courses on how to use the software. And for people like me, and probably like you, I didn't come here to learn how to use software. I came here to flip houses and make money in real estate. So I want something simple that I can go to a job site or look at pictures of a house and figure out what I'm going to do on that project and then carry out that scope. Because what a scope of work is really for is for the lenders, so they know what you want to do on that project. You're casting the vision for the project. The vendors, mostly the subcontractors that you're going to hire on that job, you want to make sure they understand what you see as the final picture. Because I do want to say that contractors are not real estate investors. They don't understand exactly what you want, so you need to make sure they know. And your scope of work is how you're going to do that. And this is for yourself, to hold yourself accountable. You're going to do lots of projects in your lifetime, I hope, and you need to set an expectation for yourself and the vendors, and you need to get the money from the lender on exactly what you're doing for that project, and then you need to hold everybody accountable. First, you do need to understand the hierarchy here. There's a project, that's the house you buy at 123 Main Street. Now, inside of that project are these 6 different checkpoints. And inside of each one of those checkpoints are jobs. Now, like I said before, I have a template for you. So all of these checkpoints are named and broken down, and the jobs that are inside of each one and the standard pricing for each unit is inside of this template. But let me explain what each one of these checkpoints are. First, you have what we call tabula rasa, right? Play on words here, but tabula rasa is a Latin word meaning a blank slate. And in tabula rasa, that's what you're trying to do, is create a blank slate. So by the time you get done with this first checkpoint, you basically have what's as close as possible to a new build where things can become systematic afterwards. So in phase 1 or checkpoint 1, we're going to do all the demo, we're going to do all the clean out, we're going to do any framing that's necessary if you're changing out the layouts, we're going to do any structural work that's necessary to make this house ready for everything else. You'd also do the roof in tabula rasa. Basically, you want to make sure that you get through any of the bleeding, anything that is causing more damage to possibly happen to your house. So structural work, the roof, making sure you stop the water. Checkpoint number 2, we call the gauntlet. This is because you're rushing to get through the city inspections. You get through all of the rough inspections so you have blue skies ahead. This is your rough mechanical, electrical, plumbing. This is your building inspection. In some municipalities, you'll need to do insulation inspections and drywall inspections first as well, which gets a little hairy because in checkpoint number 3, what we call the pregame, this is where you get ready for the party. This is where you do the drywall. This is where you do the floors. This is where you do the paint. Also getting into the exterior here, if you're going to do brand new installs, if you had all new siding, all new windows, you would do that here. Now, when you pull up the downloadable template, you're going to see that I have siding twice. It's coming up again in checkpoint number 4. But in checkpoint 3, you would do any brand new installs. So if earlier in phase 1, you had torn off all the siding and there was no siding to start with, or you had to replace all the windows, you would do those installs in the pregame. If they're just repairs or some replacements, you would do that in phase 4, the installs. Now, we say ready for the party because checkpoint number 4, the installs, is what most people see as renovating houses. This is the HGTV time. This is where people go and do their designs. What tile work are they going to use? What their kitchen is going to look like, their bathrooms, the different carpentry throughout the house, like the baseboard trim and the doors. Now, We do not get really fancy and artistic with this like they do on TV. I've made a lot of content about straying you away from doing that. We like to have a systematic approach to the finishes we use, but this is the time where you get to do the decorating if you're into that sort of thing. The next checkpoint is the trim out. This is where you're going to match all the hardware throughout the house. This is where we'd put on doorknobs, door hinges, cabinet pulls. We would put the hardware on the outside of the house, like the house numbers. This is also where we would do landscaping and anything that's curb appeal related. This is also where we do the final building inspections for mechanical, electrical, plumbing. This is where you install the hardware like the plumbing faucets. This is where you install the light fixtures. This is where everything really comes together and you get the final inspections and your CO, your certificate of occupancy. Also different for different municipalities. Some don't do COs, some just do a final building inspection as your CO. Just depends on where you live. This is where you're gonna put in appliances. Once again, it's all on the downloadable template. And finally, the finale. This is where you're gonna have a cleaner come in, do the construction cleanup and the finer clean for market if that's what you're doing. This is also where I always put a budget for handyman repairs because you know some punch list items are gonna come up. You also know that if you're selling the house, an inspection checklist is gonna come, an inspection resolution where the buyer gets an inspector to look. They're always gonna find something. So I make sure to leave a little bit of budget in here and make sure I leave a line item knowing that I'm gonna have to come back and do that. And if you're sending it off to a property management company, or if you're putting a tenant in yourself, I promise you, once somebody is living in a house, things are going to come up and you're going to have a little bit of a budget to repair those things. Now, let's talk about my big secret on budgeting. Now, first, when you look at the template, you're going to notice that there's a few different pricing units. There are budgets. This is like the handyman budget that I was just talking about. I always leave a budget with a certain dollar amount just because I know those things are gonna come up. You'll see in phase 1 here in Tabula Rasa, I always leave a budget for a roofing repair. Unless I know that the roof needs replaced, then I put an actual price for replacing the roof. I always put budgets for things like exterior siding repairs, for trim repairs inside of the house, for hardware replacements, because no matter what house I'm doing, those always come up. You'll see unit costs on there. That's pretty self-explanatory, price of that unit. A little bit different from a budget. There's price per square foot, there's price per linear foot, and then you'll see man days. And that's where the secret comes into play. You see, no matter where you are, everything basically breaks down to the cost of material and the cost of labor. And labor isn't that much different from place to place. People might make, let's say, 20 bucks an hour. That's not too much different from the Southeast to Colorado. Maybe a couple dollars difference, but it's not a couple thousands of dollars difference. So I always break things down to that formula. If I'm ever confused on what I think something should cost, I break it down to how long do I think it's gonna take to do it, and how much material do I think it's gonna take. And sometimes I'll ask a subcontractor, hey, how many guys do you think you're gonna have in there and for how long? Nonchalantly, of course, so they don't know that you're trying to figure out if their price is right or wrong. But I really encourage you to get used to thinking about things like that. Even the things that you have known prices for. For instance, floors, it's X amount per square foot. Well, watch how many guys go in there for how long. You can start getting an intuition for how much things should cost, especially when they're not as straightforward as, let's say, floors or paint. Now, the idea and the format of the scope of work is simple, but it takes a lot of reps to get used to what jobs and how much they should cost. And I've actually done a whole nother video that goes a little bit deeper into scopes of work, and I've linked it right here. So I'll see you guys soon.